How do you write more succinctly, more concisely? That's the problem that is faced by many young authors, many beginners, especially those who are not native English speakers. One of the most common mistakes that I see is students and even later academics that write whole long paragraphs that seem to go nowhere. They're not really getting to the point. And I want to offer some advice here. And of course, I'm going to keep it short so I don't fall into this ironic problem of speaking for hours about brevity. But I also want to do it in a particular way. And I will do that by looking at two masterpieces by two of my favorite authors, Stefan Zweig and Thomas Mann. These are books that I read recently. And I want to speak about the techniques that I learned from them, how you can write more succinctly. My name is Shai Dotan. I'm Associate Professor of International and Public Law at the University of Copenhagen Faculty of Law, and the purpose of this series of lectures is to improve your English. So the first book is a book by Stefan Zweig, and it's a series of volumes published in 3 volumes in English. Unfortunately, I didn't read it in the German, but in English translation, a very good one. And the title of this monumental work is Master Builders of a Spirit. So Stefan Zweig wrote very successfully a lot of biographies of famous individuals throughout history. He was also very proud that he sometimes chose people that are not exactly, in the center of attention of the media and the public, and he managed to bring them to fame, and he did it very successfully. And when he saw that the world was digressing into nationalism and what he saw barbarism between the two world wars, he wrote a series of short biographies, 9 biographies, that are designed to show the beauty and the complexity and also the connections between all the different cultures that appear in Europe. So you can find there the writings of Tolstoy and Stendhal and Balzac and Dickens, so Russia and France and England and Germany, and all these countries have a representation, and the attempt was really to show that all these cultures have a lot to offer and they all have a lot to learn from each other. And as such, it's an amazing achievement. And when you read the book, you notice how well edited it is. And I read Stefan Zweig's autobiography, The Word of Yesterday, in which he explains how he reached this result. And he said he had whole days where he would just go through the text and cut it out, shorten it. And at the end of the day, if somebody asked him, what did you do? He would say, I managed to cut out 3 pages. And this was a great achievement, not writing, but erasing. Now, this is something that is sometimes inevitable. And I have to sometimes say, when I read a work by a student or a younger colleague, you just have to erase a lot of it. But I think that that's not the best way to go for a beginner. Because once you're a beginner, the editing phase is very, very difficult. It's almost impossible to do. It requires you to mix and match sentences and paragraphs again, and only an expert like Stefan Zweig is able to do it well, and that's why I do not recommend it. The best situation is not to enter this condition to begin with. How do you do that? First of all, there's the technique that I'm going to speak about in a second, which is the technique of Thomas Mann. But if you have to edit, I would tell you, edit often. Now, those who listen to these videos, that I've been doing powerlifting and bodybuilding for many years, and I see sometimes clips on YouTube of people during the bulking phase. They're huge, they are eating a lot, and they're also building a lot of muscle, but they're getting very, very fat. And some people have managed to do incredible things by turning themselves into monsters like this in a bulking phase. I don't recommend it. I don't think it's healthy, and I don't do it myself. And I also don't recommend it to the writing, because when you are adding new ideas and you're writing very, very creatively and you're very, very fast in the way you write, you don't think too much, then you can't get some good ideas. That if you let it accumulate, you get into this monstrous text that you cannot pick it apart. But if every paragraph, once you finish writing it, you have a tiny bulking phase, or a tiny paragraph, and then a time when you cut as much as possible, and you try to make this paragraph neat, that's manageable. And then you can really see the document growing, and you can see the paragraphs accumulating, and you can tell to yourself, every paragraph that I have now is true, and I earned it, and I'm not going to erase it, or I'm not going to change it almost at all. And that, I think, is a much better method. So if you have to grow fast and add all this fat, all these unnecessary parts to your text, then at least edit it often and edit it quickly before it grows too much. Now, the second book I want to speak about, and I want to use it as an example, is Joseph and His Brothers by Thomas Mann. And I read this book also in translation. This time, against my usual habit, I read it in Hebrew. I usually read Thomas Mann in English because he has really good translations to English. But this time I read it in Hebrew, and there's a whole story behind it. And the story goes that when my grandfather, may he rest his peace, was still alive, he used to constantly give me books to read. And he was very pushy about it. So every time I met him, he would say, how is it going with the Magic Mountain? How is it going with History of Western Philosophy of Bernard Russell? He was always pushing me to read much more and faster. And then when he died, I was very, very sad because I loved him very much. But in a way, this was a little bit of a relief that I can say, okay, now I get nobody to push me so much to read very, very quickly. About a few weeks later, after he died, I get a big package to my room, and this package was Joseph and His Brothers, which he ordered for me before he died from a bookshop in Israel. And the translation is in Hebrew, which actually is the great translation for this case because the book is full of Bible references. So I think that any other language would just not do justice to the text, besides, of course, the original German, which I'm sure Thomas Mann was very, very careful in writing. And it took me many years to finish the book. Of course, I wasn't reading just that. I was sometimes putting it aside for several years, getting back to it, especially after a very, very difficult introduction. I took a break of several years. And recently I finished the full masterpiece. And I have to say, you can really see that the book, you can say that the book is concise, even though it's thousands of pages, depending on the print. I had a very, very dense print, so it was a little bit more than 1,000. And it's obviously written very, very well. And I just want to kind of take your attention to the amount of arrogance that is required to produce such a project. I mean, Stefan Zweig was saying, I'm going to write 1,000 pages, and I'm going to write about all the intellectuals that shaped Europe for the last 300 years. And of course, take 9 of them, which are the most important ones, but the book is full of references to others. So I'm going to basically speak about everything that I know in every possible way, and I'm going to do it in 1,000 pages, and I'm going to do it concisely. And then Thomas Mann says, I'm going to write 2,000 pages, and I'm going to write them about 20 pages of the Bible, mostly. Okay, so it's Egyptology and texts from Islam and texts from Judaism, but the basic, you can write this book only after you've did the research, but you can read it after you read basically 20 pages of a Bible, 30 pages of a Bible. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do it in a way that looks concise, because that's always going to be my magnum opus. I'm going to be remembered for that. And how do you do that? So I read that Thomas Mann had a very, very regulated way of working. He used to write in short sessions. He used to plan ahead very, very well before he wrote. For this book, he went to Israel and to Egypt, and he was sick on the way. It was a whole episode, an odyssey in order to get this information. And he, of course, read a lot for many, many years. And his wife, Clara Mann, she said that he used to research book, read endlessly about the topic, and then when the book was finished, he would never read about this topic again. So he was very, very precise about it. So everything goes to research, everything goes to a very single, precise point. All this goes to the research, and that's great. But when it comes to the writing, he used to write very, very little every day in a very precise and disciplined and meticulous way. And I want you, as a young writer, to emulate that. Not Stefan Zweig, who you would write dozens of pages a day and then spend the next 3 days cutting them until there are 5 pages. It's a possibility. It works for some people. It probably would not work for you as a beginner, because the effort that is required to edit out a text to make it shorter and more concise and better is just very, very great. And I don't think that a young scholar should begin like this. Now, I want to say that with one caveat. To my students in my last class on legal English, I asked them to take a paragraph and to shorten it to half a size. And following an idea that I got from Patrick Berry, I tried to ask the same from ChatGPT. The results were very, very good over ChatGPT, and my students were not that good. Some of them were actually very, very good. Some of them were medium. Some of them were doing cut and paste and not working so well. But the point is the following: it's possible, not in 100 years, maybe not even in a year, maybe today. Today, if you write a text of 100 pages and you want to make it into a paper of 25 pages, in some disciplines at least, maybe where accuracy of a language is not essential, ChatGPT will do quite a good job. So it's possible that in the future, the computers would edit for us, and you would just do the bulking. We would just be eating all the time and lifting high weights because the cut would be effortless. So it would just be, of course, the metaphor means that you would be writing paragraphs, endlessly adding all kinds of ideas, and then somebody will do the cut for us. Until this happens credibly, so you know that it's not making any mistakes. That's very, very difficult. You know that it's allowed in the school where you're working, and you know that you're able to find your own voice, and you're not so convinced by reading the text that you forget what you wanted to say. Until this happens, be Thomas Mann, not Stefan Zweig. Write in discipline, short sessions of writing where every paragraph is complete. Don't add on paragraphs. And if you have to add on paragraphs, as I said, have a cut that comes very, very soon. So bulk cut. You write a paragraph and you edit it out very quickly. Given that Thomas Mann is the best ideal here, that you have to write in a very, very disciplined way, you still need to do some editing probably afterwards, especially as a beginning. So you need to know both skills. What I want to do before I close this video, and I promise not to be too long, is to speak a little bit about techniques that can help you to reach this ideal. So in terms of writing in a very disciplined way, the technique that I recommend very much, and I spoke about in other videos as well, is have a very, very good plan before you write. So the research is done before that. You have all the table of contents ready. You have bullet points that show your ideas in a very well organized way. You constantly edit as you're writing so that you separate the process of thinking and the process of styling the writing itself. And this will make the writing much more beautiful, much easier to do, and it will prevent usually the problem of going on all kinds of convoluted routes that are not necessary. So that's a very useful way at the beginning. Once you have written a text, I really highly recommend that you read it out loud, because when you read a text out loud, you notice that certain phrases just don't sound right. And I want you to be able to say the same things that you wrote. So if you write in a way that you can feel yourself comfortable speaking it out, probably you write in a way that is easier. And you will notice if some words are obsolete or rare words that really don't belong there, or if things are repetitive, you will notice it when you read it out loud. And that's why it's a very useful technique. Now, in addition to that, I refer you to the hundreds of really excellent style books that are out there, that most of them say something very similar. So you have to summarize that. If you go to Strunk and White, they will tell you, write simply, use the active voice, don't use the passive voice unless you really have to. If you read somebody like Zinsser, he would say, take away all the clutter. If you read somebody like the amazing Helen Sword, you would see that she recommends to avoid what she calls zombie nouns, so taking out verbs that could be real active verbs and make them into nouns by adding the letters ion or ing. So basically shifting them into a noun. So instead of I describe, I made the description. I just added several words. I made the entire sentence more complicated. So once you've mastered the idea that you need to write in a very organized way, that you need to prepare ahead, and you use your ability to read out the sentences to edit it, the next step is use the literature. Style books are there to help you. Most of them, almost all of them, will tell you how to become more succinct and more concise, and they have a lot of small advice how to do that. Some of them really to the point of choosing one word over another, or being the sentence in one word over another. So that's the route that you should go. But if you want my main advice, as it was, as long as ChatGPT cannot do the editing for you, be more like Thomas Mann, be less like Stefan Zweig, because editing out very, very bulky long text is something that is incredibly hard to do.